My name is Patricia Greer, and I'm 28 years old. If you asked me a year ago what I wanted most in life, I would have said stability. A steady job, a partner I could build with a future I didn't have to second guess. For the longest time, I thought I had that. I thought I had found the man who saw me, who valued me for being dependable, thoughtful, loyal. Turns out I was just the stepping stone he needed until something better came along. The night everything broke still replays in my head like a scene I never auditioned for. It was Franklin's birthday, and I had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The dinner reservation at an elegant restaurant downtown. The kind of place with warm lighting, violin music in the background, and servers who glide by like shadows. I wanted him to feel special, celebrated. After all, hadn't I been the one holding him up these past few years? While he tried to find himself, I bought him a custom watch, nothing gaudy, but sleek and meaningful, engraved with, "For all our times together." It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol, a reminder that I believed in us, in him. I had even called two of his closest friends ahead of time, arranging for a banner, a little cake and champagne waiting at the table. They brought others too, people I didn't know well, loud social types with opinions bigger than the room. But I swallowed my unease. This was Franklin's night. When I arrived with him blindfolded for the surprise, he laughed and teased me, saying, "Patricia, you're such a sap." There was an edge in his voice, but I brushed it aside. He always teased me for being sentimental. Inside, the group cheered as we walked in. Balloons a banner, with "Happy Birthday, Franklin," clinking glasses. He basked in the attention, his smile wide, his posture tall. I watched him glow in that spotlight, and for a moment I felt proud. This is the man I've built a life with. This is us. Dinner started with appetizers, laughter bouncing across the table. Most of the jokes were inside ones from his friend group, references to nights out. I hadn't been invited to stories I didn't understand. I smiled politely, chimed in when I could, but I felt like a guest in my own partner's world. Still, I told myself this is what relationships are. Compromise. Show up, support him, even if it's not your scene. Then came the toast. It was his friend Olivia who raised her glass first. To Franklin May, this year bring upgrades and endless possibilities. Everyone laughed. A ripple of knowing giggles passed around the table, eyes darting between Franklin and me. I tilted my head, forcing a polite smile. Upgrades, I asked lightly, trying not to sound small. That's when Franklin leaned back in his chair, smirk, tugging at his lips. His eyes locked on mine, cold and glinting, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. He lifted his champagne flute. To upgrading, he said, voice smooth but sharp, because life's too short to settle. Laughter erupted. His friends clapped. Olivia nearly choked on her drink. Franklin didn't laugh, though. He kept his eyes on me, watching the words cut. My fork froze midway to my mouth. A hot flush spread across my skin. Upgrading? I whispered, barely audible. He shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. Come on, Patricia. Don't act surprised. We've been drifting for months. I met someone. Her name's Ava. She gets me, pushes me, unlike you. The room stilled, then Olivia piped up, too eager to twist the knife. Yeah, Patricia, don't take it the wrong way, but Franklin deserves excitement. You're sweet, but... She glanced around for backup. You're kind of predictable. Predictable. The word echoed in my skull, hammering with each heartbeat. I forced a brittle smile. So this is how you tell me. My voice wavered, but I kept it steady enough not to break. Franklin leaned forward, his expression turning patronizing. Don't be dramatic. This isn't cheating. We've been over for a while, at least emotionally. I tried to hint, but you never picked up. Ava just happened. He sipped his drink like he hadn't just detonated my world. In that moment, time slowed. I thought of the nights I'd stayed awake helping him polish resumes, the mornings I'd covered rent when his job transition dragged on the promotion I'd declined because he wasn't ready to move cities. Sacrifices I had made without hesitation, because isn't that what love is, teamwork? And here he was, reducing me to safe, stable, boring. An outdated model upgraded at his convenience. A laugh, sharp and humorless, bubbled in my throat but never left. Instead, I swallowed hard, reached for my purse, and flagged the waiter. Happy birthday, Franklin, I said evenly. I paid the entire bill, over $400, including the custom cake I had ordered days earlier. My hands didn't tremble as I slid my card across the table, but my heart hammered so loud I thought the whole restaurant could hear. I left the wrapped watch box on the table unopened, a present he'd never deserve. Then I stood, lifted my glass halfway, and said with a calm smile that cost me everything, to your upgrade. And I walked out. The night air was crisp when I stepped outside. I clutched my coat tighter, my heels clicking against the pavement as though each step was a promise not to collapse. Behind me, laughter still floated from the restaurant, muffled through glass. I got into my car. On the passenger seat sat the little bakery box with his cake still sealed, a cruel reminder of the celebration that had turned into my humiliation. I turned the key engine, purring, and stared at the city lights reflecting in the windshield. My throat burned, my chest ached, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, this is the last time I'll pay for someone else's betrayal. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove into the night, unaware that this was only the beginning. Because upgrades sometimes they come with glitches. And Franklin was about to learn that the hard way. When I got home that night, the silence of our apartment was unbearable. Every corner screamed of us, his jacket hanging carelessly on the chair. I'd bought his sneakers lined up beside mine by the door, the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the air. It should have felt familiar, comforting. Instead, it felt contaminated, like everything had been poisoned by that single word upgrade. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even wait for him to come back so I could demand answers. Maybe part of me knew there was nothing left to save. Instead, I went to the closet and pulled out a duffel bag. Essentials only. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. My hands moved with robotic efficiency, while my chest felt heavy enough to crush me. On the kitchen counter, I left my apartment key and a note. 4 words only. Take care of yourself. No anger, no pleading, just an ending. That night, I crashed on my friend Lila's couch across town. She didn't ask questions right away, just handed me a blanket and a glass of water. I curled up, staring at the ceiling, the events of the night replaying like a cruel movie. Franklin's smirk. Olivia's laughter. The sting of being compared to some flashy new woman named Ava. My pillow grew damp, but I didn't sob loudly. The tears slid down quietly, like I didn't even deserve the release. The days that followed blurred together. I turned off my phone, muted every notification, and let the silence swallow me. But silence isn't empty, it's loud. It echoed with every memory of sacrifices I had made for Franklin. I remembered the time I turned down a promotion that would have meant relocating because he said, I can't uproot my network here, Patricia. This city is where my career is taking off. I'd smiled back then, kissed him, and said, of course. Or the week his laptop crashed right before a big interview, how I stayed up all night fixing it while he slept and then cheered him on the next morning. Moments where I had put him first, chosen us over me, and he had thrown it all away, dismissing me as predictable. The word dug deeper the more I thought about it. Predictable, boring, safe. Maybe I was those things, but didn't love need some predictability? Didn't stability matter? I questioned myself endlessly. Was I the problem? Had I been too steady, too dependable? Had I mistaken comfort for connection? After a week, Lila coaxed me into seeing a therapist. At first, I resisted. I thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle things alone. But the first session changed me. I sat in a warmly lit room across from a woman with kind eyes. The words spilled out before I could stop them. The birthday dinner, the toast, the public humiliation. I told her everything. My voice trembling, my hands twisting in my lap. When I finally fell silent, she leaned forward and said gently, Patricia, you didn't lose him. He lost you. People who chase chaos call stability boring because they can't handle peace. But you are the kind of person who builds foundations. That's rare. That's powerful. Her words cracked something inside me. For the first time, I saw myself not as Franklin's leftovers, but as someone who had given without receiving. She ended the session with a line that would echo in my mind for months. Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence. I clung to that. So I didn't call Franklin. I didn't text him. I didn't block him in a fit of rage. I simply vanished from his orbit. No drama, no scenes. Instead, I poured myself into rebuilding. I started hitting the gym again, not to change myself, but to feel stronger, more grounded in my own body. I journaled late at night, pages filling with hurt, anger questions, and eventually clarity. At work, I raised my hand for projects I would have once declined, too worried about balancing his needs with mine. Without him, there was no more excuse to hold myself back. And slowly the fog lifted. The pain dulled, though it never fully disappeared. I began to see the truth. Franklin had mistaken my loyalty for weakness. He had confused my consistency with complacency. But what he didn't realize was that the woman he called boring was also the woman who could walk away without looking back. One evening, weeks after the breakup, I found myself standing on Lila's balcony, staring out at the city lights. The same lights I'd stared at from my car the night I left that restaurant. But this time I wasn't whispering vows through tears. I was calm, steady. Franklin thought he had upgraded, but maybe the real upgrade was mine, choosing myself. I didn't know then what was coming or how the universe had its own way of balancing scales. But I could feel something shifting, and when it did, I would be ready. By the time 3 months had passed, I had started to breathe again. The nights weren't as heavy, the mornings didn't sting as much. My routines no longer revolved around Franklin's moods, his career dreams, or his late-night disappearances. I was, for the first time in years, living for myself. The apartment Lila helped me find was small, one-bedroom. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I picked the curtains, I arranged the books, I cooked meals that were only for me. The freedom was subtle but intoxicating. And just when I began to think Franklin had become a closed chapter, whispers of him started floating back into my life. The first was casual. At a coding meetup, I'd joined something I never would have done before I overheard a guy mentioning Ava, the so-called upgrade. He wasn't close to them, but he'd seen her posts online. Cryptic messages about betrayal, heartbreak, and learning who your real friends are. I smiled faintly to myself, though I kept my face neutral. It's starting, I thought. A week later, Lila came home from work with news. "You won't believe who I ran into," she said, tossing her bag on the couch. "That friend of Franklin's. What's her name? Olivia. The one who laughed the loudest that night." My body stiffened, but I kept chopping vegetables for dinner. What about her? She's distancing herself from him. Apparently, Franklin's new girl caught him cheating. With someone even newer, younger. The knife in my hand paused mid-slice. I let the information sink in the absurdity of it. Upgrading the upgrade. It was almost poetic. Later, through another mutual acquaintance, I learned the details. Ava had thought Franklin was her ticket to a glittering lifestyle. He'd promised her trips, conferences, networking opportunities. She posted photos of them together, playing the perfect couple. But behind the scenes, he was the same old Franklin. Half-truths, flattery, empty promises. He started canceling plans with her claiming work emergencies. He ghosted her for days. And then the truth spilled out. Ava caught him texting a woman from his office. Younger. Flirty messages with hotel room bookings to match. When she confronted him expecting remorse, Franklin just laughed. "Relax, Ava. We're not that serious. You were fun, but come on, I'm not settling yet." Sound familiar? The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed out loud when I heard it. Those were nearly the same words he'd said to me. But Ava's downfall wasn't just emotional. It was financial. Franklin had convinced her to split costs for their adventures, hotel bills, event tickets, even flights for a conference he swore would change her career. When he ghosted her, she was left holding the invoices. She scrambled to cover them, maxing out cards, borrowing from friends. Her clients noticed the distraction. Missed deadlines, sloppy work. Whispers spread through her own network that she was unreliable. She had burned herself out chasing Franklin's empty promises, and now she was left with nothing but debt and a reputation slipping through her fingers. And the friends, the same circle that clinked glasses at my humiliation, they were nowhere to be found. Olivia stopped answering her calls, claiming she was too negative. The others drifted away, muting her endless venting about Franklin. Without Franklin's shine, Ava was just a drain to them. It all unraveled in a matter of weeks. When I heard these stories, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't gloat online, didn't send Franklin a smug message. Instead, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and let the quiet satisfaction wash over me. Because karma doesn't send notifications. It doesn't need announcements. It simply unfolds slowly and thoroughly until the person who thought they were untouchable finds themselves alone. The strange part, I felt no urge to take revenge. Not once did I think about sabotaging Franklin or warning Ava or exposing him to the world. I didn't have to. Life was doing it for me. Still, I won't pretend I didn't enjoy the irony. This was the man who had dismissed me as predictable. This was the man who thought stability was boring, that kindness was weakness. And yet here he was, spinning the same tired lines, repeating the same betrayals, leaving chaos in his wake. While I was finally learning what it felt like to be free. One evening, Lila looked at me across our kitchen table. "You don't even seem angry anymore," she said. I stirred my tea slowly. I was. But now, I just feel sorry for him. He keeps chasing excitement, thinking it'll make him feel alive. But you can't upgrade your way out of who you are. She leaned back, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You know, Patricia, I think that's the best revenge of all. Watching him become his own downfall." I nodded, though in my heart I knew this wasn't the end. Because men like Franklin never vanish quietly. They circle back once the thrill is gone and the silence sets in. And I could feel it in my bones he would come looking for me. I knew it was only a matter of time. Men like Franklin don't let go. Not because they love you, but because they hate losing the comfort they once mocked. It started one night with a notification I almost ignored, a DM on Instagram. His profile picture was the same smug grin, though thinner now, older somehow. Hey Patricia, hope you're doing well. Been thinking about you a lot. Miss our talks. I stared at the words for a long moment. My thumb hovered over the reply box, not with temptation, but with disbelief. Months had passed. He'd humiliated me, replaced me, discarded me like last season's phone model, and now here he was, fishing with a half-hearted hook. I didn't reply. A week later, another message appeared. I know I messed up. Ava was a mistake. Can we at least talk just coffee? Still, I stayed silent. Then came the texts. Somehow he had kept my number. The first voicemail was tearful. Patricia, please. I feel so alone. You were always the one who listened. I don't have anyone now. I need you. The next voicemail turned sharp, almost accusatory. Why are you ignoring me after everything we had? This is cruel, Patricia. I thought you were better than this. Cruel. That word almost made me laugh. Cruel was being blindsided at a birthday dinner. Cruel was watching your partner toast to upgrading in front of strangers. I pressed delete without hesitation. But Franklin wasn't done. One afternoon, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Patricia. The voice was unmistakable, his mother, cold-clipped like she'd swallowed vinegar. This is Franklin's mother. He's devastated. Whatever happened between you two family is family. You should at least hear him out. He's sorry, you know. I closed my eyes, my grip on the phone tightening. Family. The same family who never once called to congratulate me on promotions, who never thanked me for covering Franklin's bills. Now they expected me to play savior. I don't owe him anything, I said firmly, and hung up before she could finish. Days later, his sister messaged me on Facebook. Mia's going through hell. You owe him a conversation. Don't be a jerk about it. I blocked her instantly. The escalation came next. I was leaving work one afternoon when security called up from the lobby. There's someone here asking for you. I looked down from the glass balcony and saw him. Franklin, standing there with slumped shoulders, eyes bloodshot, clutching his phone like a lifeline. For a moment, my chest tightened. Not from longing, no. From the surrealness of it. To see him reduced from that arrogant man who smirked across a dinner table to this hollow figure. I went down, but I kept my distance, standing a good 10 feet away. Patricia, he said, voice cracking. Please, just 5 minutes. I crossed my arms. What could you possibly say to me that you didn't already say in front of your friends? He winced. I was stupid. Ava was a disaster. She used me, cheated, left me with nothing. My friends ditched me. They were never real. But you were real. You were the only one who cared. His words spilled out in a frantic rush, desperation dripping from every syllable. He even tried to step closer, but I held my ground. Don't rewrite history, Franklin, I said quietly. You didn't lose me. You threw me away. His jaw clenched. Why are you acting like I meant nothing after everything I gave you? I cut him off, my tone icy. Everything you gave me, Franklin, I carried us. I sacrificed for you, and you humiliated me to look powerful. Don't stand here pretending you were some great gift. The mask cracked then. His desperation flickered into anger. You're petty, he spat. Still holding on to that one dinner. You can't forgive, can you? I almost laughed. The absurdity of it. He thought forgiveness was owed, that all it took was him snapping his fingers. I shook my head, turned toward the elevators. No, Franklin, I just don't care anymore. He shouted after me, voice echoing in the lobby. You'll regret this. You'll end up alone. The elevator doors closed on his words, sealing me into blessed silence. That night, as I sat on my couch sipping tea, I thought about the therapist's words. Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence. She was right. My silence had driven Franklin to desperation. My indifference had done more damage than any confrontation ever could. And deep down, I knew he wasn't done. Men like Franklin never stop scratching at closed doors. But the difference was clear. I wasn't waiting on the other side anymore. If Franklin's reappearance had rattled me, I didn't let it last. The next morning, I poured all that restless energy into work. My company had been hinting at an upcoming promotion for months, but I'd always shied away from it before. Back when Franklin was in my life, I was constantly calculating how my choices might affect him. If I take this, will it upset his schedule? Will it mean moving cities? Will it bruise his ego? Now there was no one to consider but me. So when my manager asked if I was ready to lead a new project, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said with a confidence that surprised even me. That yes marked the beginning of something bigger. The weeks that followed were busy, but not overwhelming. I found myself enjoying late nights at the office, collaborating with colleagues, taking pride in my independence. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by someone else's instability. I also started making new connections outside of work. The coding meetup I had joined became more than just a distraction, it became a place where I felt seen, valued, respected for my skills. There I wasn't Franklin's girlfriend or the predictable one, I was just Patricia. And that's where I met Arthur. Arthur wasn't flashy. He wasn't the type to brag about his job or show off expensive things. He was steady grounded with a dry wit that crept up on you unexpectedly. The first time he made me laugh, really laugh, it caught me off guard. I realized I hadn't felt that kind of lightness in a long time. We started as friends, coffee after meetups, quick lunches when schedules aligned. But there was no pressure, no hidden agenda, just conversation that flowed easily unforced. One evening, after walking me home, he paused at my doorstep. Patricia, he said, his voice calm. I like the way you don't try to impress anyone. You just are, and that's rare. The words nearly undid me. I had spent years with a man who belittled my steadiness, who turned my loyalty into a flaw. And here was someone calling it rare, precious. That night I cried not from sadness, but from relief. Dating Arthur wasn't like being with Franklin. There were no games, no dramatic highs and lows, no cruel tests of loyalty. With Franklin, I had been constantly bracing for the next storm. With Arthur, peace wasn't boring, it was safe. Safe in the best way. One night over dinner, I told him Franklin used to say I was predictable. Arthur smiled softly. Predictable can mean dependable. Dependable means trustworthy. That sounds like a strength, not a weakness. I held his gaze, my chest tightening with something warm. For the first time, I believed it. It wasn't just Arthur, though. Everything around me began to shift. I decorated my apartment with small touches that reflected who I was, not who I thought a partner wanted me to be. I framed photographs I'd taken years ago, picked out vibrant plants, even painted one wall a daring shade of teal. Lila noticed the difference one night when she came over. You seem lighter, she said, curling up on my couch with a glass of wine. I think I am, I admitted. For so long, I thought being stable made me dull. But maybe it just means I finally know what I want. She grinned. Sounds like someone's finally upgraded. We both laughed at the irony of it. Still, a small part of me knew the past wasn't done with me. Because men like Franklin don't just vanish into the background. They circle back again and again, trying to claw their way into the life you've rebuilt. And while I was finally moving forward with a career, I was proud of friendships that were genuine and a relationship rooted in peace. I could feel it. The storm wasn't over, it was just circling closer. But this time I wasn't afraid. It was almost a year to the day since Franklin's birthday dinner, the night my life cracked in half. By then the wound had long since closed. I had my promotion, my own apartment that finally felt like a home, and Arthur steady kind. Arthur by my side. So when a mutual friend from my coding circle invited us to a backyard party, I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't supposed to be anything dramatic, just grilling music laughter. I had no idea Franklin would be there. The night was warm, strings of lights glowing above the yard. People clustered in little groups, drinks in hand, voices rising over the hum of a playlist. Arthur squeezed my hand as we moved through the crowd, easy and relaxed. I was mid-conversation with a friend when I felt it. That shift in the air, the sudden hush in the corner of the yard. And then I saw him. Franklin. He looked different. Not the glowing, smug man who had once leaned back in his chair and toasted to upgrades. This version was thinner, his eyes hollowed, his posture sagging. He was dressed decently enough, but there was a tiredness clinging to him like a shadow. Our gazes locked, and for a split-second time folded in on itself. I was back at that restaurant, frozen fork suspended midair. But then I blinked, and the past dissolved. Because this time I wasn't alone. This time Arthur stood beside me, his hand steady in mine. Franklin froze, then moved quickly, too quickly across the yard, ignoring Arthur completely. His voice cracked as he reached me. Patricia, I didn't know you'd be here. I kept my expression calm, even polite. Hello, Franklin. He swallowed, eyes darting nervously to the people nearby who had gone quiet watching. This is fate, right? We're meant to talk. I need to tell you, I'm sorry for everything. The dinner. Ava, all of it. I was wrong. His words spilled out like water from a broken dam. His voice was pleading, his hands shaking as though grasping for something he couldn't hold. Please, Patricia, he continued louder now, his desperation carrying. My life's a mess. No job stability, no real friends. I miss what we had. You were the best thing I ever had. The entire party had stilled their conversations, fading into silence. Even the music seemed dimmer. Everyone was watching, sensing the tension, like electricity in the air. Arthur shifted beside me, but didn't intervene. He trusted me to handle this. That trust gave me strength. I tilted my head slightly, letting a small smile tug at my lips. Not kind, not cruel, just measured. Funny, I said softly. I remember you toasting to upgrading. Didn't you say I was safe, stable, boring? That you deserve more. His face flushed crimson, the memory clearly cutting through whatever excuse he had prepared. That was a mistake. I was influenced by people who didn't care about me. I see it now. They're all gone. But you, Patricia, you're real. Please just give me another chance. A murmur rippled through the group around us. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for my response, the way they'd once waited for my reaction at that humiliating dinner. But tonight the stage was mine. I let the silence stretch just long enough for his words to hang in the air. Then I laughed, lightly shaking my head. Hilarious, really. You humiliated me in public, and now here you are doing the same thing to yourself, begging me in front of everyone to undo the very choices you celebrated. His mouth opened closed like he was choking on words. Patricia, please. I cut him off, my tone cool, almost mocking. You called me predictable, Franklin. But let me tell you something. Predictability doesn't cheat. Predictability doesn't abandon you in debt. Predictability doesn't leave you alone at a party with no one to stand beside you. The crowd stirred soft laughter, weaving through the tension. Franklin's eyes darted to Arthur for the first time, as if only just realizing he was there. Who's he? Arthur didn't flinch. He simply squeezed my hand tighter. I smiled, this time warm and genuine, as I looked at Arthur. This is Arthur, my real upgrade, one that doesn't come at the expense of my dignity. Franklin's shoulders sagged, his face twisting with humiliation. The onlookers weren't sympathetic. They watched him with quiet disdain, whispers passing like wildfire. For once, Franklin wasn't the center of admiration. He was the cautionary tale. I leaned in slightly, my voice low enough for only him to hear. You thought you were upgrading. But the truth is, Franklin, you've been downgrading your whole life. His eyes filled, whether with anger or shame, I couldn't tell. But he couldn't hold my gaze. He turned abruptly, pushing past the crowd, disappearing into the shadows of the yard. As silence lingered, I raised my glass, smiling toward Arthur and the friends around us. To real upgrades, I said, clearly my voice carrying. The kind that don't humiliate you in public. Laughter rippled through the group, warm and genuine, sealing the moment. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt completely free. The party kept moving after Franklin fled, but the shift in energy lingered like perfume in the air. People whispered about what they'd just witnessed, some shaking their heads, others smirking. But me, I just felt lighter. For months I had carried the weight of his betrayal, his cruel words, the echo of laughter at that dinner table. Tonight all of that dissolved, because I hadn't just survived him, I had outgrown him. Later that night, as Arthur and I walked home hand in hand, he broke the silence. You didn't even flinch, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. I smiled faintly, because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. And I finally realized, he doesn't get to define me. Arthur squeezed my hand. He didn't say more, and he didn't need to. His quiet presence spoke louder than any words. But closure isn't always neat. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I debated letting it ring, but something in me wanted the final word. I answered. It was Franklin. His voice was raw, hoarse, half broken. Patricia. Last night, I didn't mean for it to be like that. He sucked in a shaky breath. I don't know who I am without you. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the girl I had been sitting frozen at that restaurant, the one who paid his birthday bill while he toasted to an upgrade, and any pity I felt vanished. You know who you are, Franklin, I said coldly. You're the man who humiliated me to feel powerful, the man who traded stability for chaos, and now you're reaping exactly what you sowed. He tried again, his voice cracking. Just give me one more chance. I cut him off sharply. No, there are no more chances. I don't need revenge. I don't need your apology. What I needed, I already gave myself freedom. There was a long pause, then the line went dead. And just like that, I knew the chapter was truly closed. That evening, I stood by my window as the city lights flickered on. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the woman Franklin had dismissed as boring. It was a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece without him. I whispered into the glass, almost like a prayer, "You don't get to haunt me anymore." The following weekend, Arthur and I went to a quiet cafe. Over coffee, I told him everything the promotion I'd once turned down for Franklin, the years of sacrifice, the humiliation at that dinner. I laid it all bare. Arthur listened, patient and attentive. When I finally fell silent, he reached across the table, covered my hand with his, and said, "Patricia, he didn't upgrade. He downgraded. And you've upgraded in the best way possible. You chose yourself." His words sank deep, anchoring me in a truth I'd been circling for months. Franklin had taken my trust and twisted it into humiliation. But what he didn't understand was that humiliation can become fuel. Pain can become clarity. And clarity is closure. The next day I did something small but symbolic. I unboxed the custom watch I had once bought for him, the gift I'd left unopened at that restaurant table. It was still pristine, untouched. I took it to a pawn shop. The man behind the counter examined it, nodded, and slid cash across to me. It wasn't much compared to what I'd spent, but it felt like more than money. It felt like reclaiming something. I walked out of the shop lighter, freer, unshackled from the ghost of Franklin. From then on, whenever I thought about him, it wasn't with anger or longing. It was with detachment, the way you might think of a stranger you once passed on the street. He was irrelevant, and that was my closure. At another gathering, weeks later, someone mentioned his name in passing. Franklin. "Yeah, I heard he's been bouncing between jobs. Doesn't stick to anything. Always chasing something better." I just sipped my drink, smiled faintly, and said nothing. Because the truth was clear, I didn't need to defend myself anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. The contrast between us spoke for itself. He was still chasing upgrades, and I had already found mine. As I curled up with Arthur that night, his arm draped around me, I realized something profound. Closure isn't always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's about indifference. And I had finally reached it. A year after that humiliating dinner, I finally understood something I wish I'd known sooner. Stability isn't boring. Stability is freedom when you're with the right person. Franklin used to call me predictable. He thought I was safe routine, dependable to a fault. And maybe I was. But what he didn't realize is that predictability is what you build a life on. It's the foundation for trust, for peace, for love that doesn't collapse the moment a shiny distraction appears. He called it dull. Arthur calls it rare. That difference is everything. When I look back now, I don't feel anger, not even regret. Because without Franklin's betrayal, I might never have discovered my own strength. I might have kept shrinking myself to fit inside his world, mistaking sacrifice for love, mistaking chaos for passion. But life has a funny way of teaching lessons. Karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, waiting for the right moment to flip the script. And when it does, you don't even have to lift a finger. Franklin humiliated me once. A year later, he humiliated himself, chasing upgrades until there was nothing left but emptiness. All while I found my upgrade without looking. Peace, stability, love that feels like coming home instead of walking on eggshells. One evening, not long ago, Arthur and I walked past the very restaurant where Franklin's birthday dinner had taken place. The lights still glowed warm, couples still laughed over pasta and champagne. I stopped for a moment, staring through the glass. For a split second, I saw myself there again, smiling, hopeful, a wrapped gift, burning a hole in my purse, unaware of the storm about to break. But then Arthur's hand brushed mine, steady and gentle, and the memory faded into nothing. I whispered under my breath, almost like a farewell, "Thank you for teaching me what not to accept." And then I walked on without looking back. To anyone listening, I'll say this. Never let someone convince you that kindness is weakness or that stability is dull. The people who mock those things are usually the ones running from their own emptiness. The truth. Kindness is rare, loyalty is priceless, and stability isn't boring. It's the quiet, steady rhythm that lets love flourish. Franklin thought he'd upgraded, but the only thing he upgraded to was chaos. Me, I upgraded to myself first. And then when I was ready to a partner who saw me as enough exactly as I am. So here's my final toast, not to revenge, not to regret, but to freedom. Because some upgrades come with glitches, mine came with peace.